Mom carved the Thanksgiving turkey and smiled. "Thanks to your miscarriage, our family line remains pure." Relatives burst into laughter as my sister patted her son's head. "One real grandchild ice enough, don't you think?" I set down my fork and stood up silently, but none of them knew this would be their last family gathering. I took a sip of coffee while gazing at the frost-covered garden outside my window. The temperature had dropped suddenly, announcing the arrival of winter in Minnesota. In our garden, situated in Eden Prairie's upscale neighborhood, autumn leaves still lingered. The frost on the fallen leaves sparkled in the morning sun. Another Thanksgiving season had arrived. My career as a senior accountant at a major accounting firm was going well. My marriage to David was stable, and I had no complaints about living in this town. Only my relationship with my mother remained delicately strained. "Amy, are you ready?" David called from behind me. When I turned around, my husband was already dressed in his suit and holding his travel suitcase. He had been steadily building his career as an IT company executive. He was a gentle soul, understanding of my work, and always supportive and ideal husband. "Yes, I'm fine. Don't worry," I answered with a smile. David would miss this year's Thanksgiving due to an important business meeting. It was a crucial business trip that could determine the success of his company's new project. "Did you tell your mother?" "Yes, but she wasn't happy about it. She said, 'I can't believe you're putting work before Thanksgiving.'" I mimicked my mother Martha's words. As an influential member of the First Presbyterian Church, she wielded considerable power. She managed the church's charitable activities and social events, reigning as a central figure in the community. For Mother, Thanksgiving meant more than just a family gathering. It was a perfect opportunity to showcase her perfect family to the local community. Mother often used the phrase, "pure bloodline." It was probably her way of expressing pride in being part of a prestigious family that had been rooted in this land for generations. However, that phrase sometimes took on a cruel meaning, especially after what happened 2 years ago. At that time, I had finally become pregnant but suffered a miscarriage. After that, Mother's attitude subtly changed. While she remained outwardly affectionate, there were times when I caught glimpses of what seemed like relief in her expression. Meanwhile, her doting on my sister Linda's son Tommy grew more intense by the day. Linda was a devoted housewife actively involved in church activities. She tended to be heavily dependent on Mother, prioritizing Mother's opinions even in raising her 5-year-old son Tommy. Her husband John was a real estate company owner. Though honest in character, he had recently shown signs of concern about changes in his wife's behavior. David placed his hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" "Yes," I turned to face my husband and smiled. "Don't worry, I'll handle it my way." David nodded silently. He understood how I felt. That's probably why he felt guilty about this business trip. I should get going. I stood up and walked my husband to the door. A cold wind blew in. Tomorrow was Thanksgiving. Many relatives would gather at Mother's house for dinner. My sister Linda would come with her husband John and their son Tommy. Linda had been acting strange lately. She seemed too close to Adam Foster, the assistant pastor who had arrived 6 months ago. While the charismatic young assistant pastor was popular among the female church members, his relationship with Linda was clearly unusual. I let out a deep sigh. Tomorrow was Thanksgiving, Mother's perfect dinner party, a family gathering in a large white house, with elegant table settings. But underneath it all, something was definitely starting to crumble. With my calm and rational nature, I could see it clear as day. My accountant's intuition told me that some significant truth was being hidden, and I had a definite feeling that the time for that truth to be revealed was approaching. What was about to happen might drastically change the way our family existed, but perhaps it was an unavoidable destiny. That's what I felt. The Thanksgiving morning began with a biting cold. In the car heading to Mother's house, I tried to calm my anxious heart while turning up the heat. The sky beyond the windshield was a gloomy gray, with occasional snowflakes dancing in the air. Mother's house stood in one of Eden Prairie's most prestigious neighborhoods. The large white house, passed down through generations, could rightfully be called one of the town's landmarks. Several cars were already parked in the circular driveway at the entrance. Relatives were starting to gather. As I opened the front door, Mother's voice rang out. Martha had already made perfect preparations, a navy blue dress with a pearl necklace. Her graying hair was meticulously styled, and her makeup was carefully applied. "Is David really not coming?" The question came as if she had been waiting to ask it. There was a slight tone of reproach in Mother's voice. "No." I explained that he has an important business meeting. "Well, I suppose it can't be helped. You young people always put work before family." Ignoring the sarcasm in those words, I headed to the kitchen. There, Aunt Carol and my cousin Jennifer were already helping with the meal preparations. The turkey had already started to brown nicely in the oven. "Oh, Amy, I'm glad we could help," Carol called out to me. In her eyes floated an emotion that could have been either sympathy or pity. Since my miscarriage 2 years ago, the way relatives looked at me had subtly changed like this. Soon after, the doorbell rang, the arrival of Linda's family. "Tommy, come to Grandma." Martha rushed forward, almost ready to embrace her grandson the moment she saw him. 5-year-old Tommy laughed happily in his grandmother's arms. Behind them, Linda wore a satisfied expression. Her husband John looked somewhat uneasy and glanced briefly at me. While waiting for dinner preparations to be completed, the usual small talk unfolded in the living room. Church activities, neighborhood gossip, children's school stories. But to me the conversation sounded strangely hollow. In particular, I noticed that Linda was avoiding any mention of the new assistant pastor. "Well, dinner is ready," Mother's voice echoed through the living room, and everyone began moving to the dining room. The table was set with expensive Lenox china, and candles flickered in silver candlesticks. In the center sat the turkey, gleaming golden brown. "Let us pray." Everyone sat down, folded their hands and bowed their heads. Martha began reciting the prayer. Her voice was filled with its usual dignity and confidence. "And we thank you for all the blessings bestowed upon us. Amen." After the prayer, the serving of food began. Martha took up the large silver knife that had been passed down through generations, and began carving the turkey. Her movements revealed years of experience. "Amy, you're always so focused on work," Aunt Carol addressed me. "Don't you think it's time to find a new purpose in life?" "Yes," Cousin Jennifer chimed in. "God sometimes gives us trials for a reason." The meaning behind those words was clear. They were referring to my miscarriage 2 years ago. I silently lowered my eyes to the food on my plate. "Well," but Martha suddenly spoke up. While carefully carving the turkey, she said in an inappropriately cheerful voice, "Your miscarriage saved our bloodline from being tainted." Those words struck the dinner table like an icy blade. Yet the relatives rushed to laugh. To my ears, their laughter sounded cruelly frivolous. And then came the decisive blow from my sister. Linda, gently stroking her son's head, said with a broad smile, "After all, a real grandchild is all we need." There was a moment when time seemed to stop. I slowly put down my fork and quietly stood up from my chair. All eyes around the table turned to me at once. "Amy?" There was a slight tremor in Mother's voice. "Please excuse me for a moment," I announced this calmly but firmly, and left the dining room. Behind me, after a moment of silence, confused sounds began to emerge. I stood before the large window in the living room, looking outside. The light snow had turned into proper snowfall without my noticing. White snowflakes were slowly dancing down through the darkness. The sight had a strangely calming effect on my heart. After a while I heard sounds from the kitchen. When I turned around, John was standing there. Linda's husband wore an obviously troubled expression. "Amy, I need to talk to you." His voice was different from his usual confident tone as a real estate company president. It carried a complex tone mixing anxiety and determination. "Actually, something's wrong with Linda." I nodded silently. John looked around cautiously, then continued in an even lower voice. "She's been meeting with the young assistant pastor frequently." And he paused for a moment and let out a deep sigh. "I want to get a DNA test for Tommy. Will you help me?" In that moment, all the pieces connected. In my mind, vague anxiety transformed into certainty. My accountant's analytical skills had already begun collecting various circumstantial evidence. "I understand," I answered quietly. The truth revealed on this Thanksgiving night would forever change how our family existed. But it was an unavoidable destiny. 3 days after Thanksgiving, I sat in my home office, staring at my computer screen. David was still away on his business trip, and in the silent house, only the sound of typing echoed. I ordered the DNA test kit. An email from John had arrived last night. He said he had purchased a commercial testing kit from Amazon. Modern technology has made tests that were once only possible at specialized institutions available to anyone. However, I had other investigative methods. Using my experience and knowledge as an accountant, I could track people's behavior patterns through their numerical traces. I started by examining the church's accounting records. As the person in charge of auditing First Presbyterian Church's accounts, I had access. I carefully checked each record since Adam Foster's appointment. This is I found unusual expenditures in the church's charitable activity funds. Every month, a fixed amount was being transferred to a specific account. While the amount wasn't large, its regularity was suspicious. "Amy, what are you investigating?" At the sudden voice, I quickly closed the screen. When I turned around, Mother was standing in the doorway of my study. "Just work, Mother. Preparing for the church audit." "I see." Mother showed an expression of acceptance, but doubt remained in her eyes. "Your behavior at Thanksgiving dinner was truly disrespectful." "Mother, your comment was." "Think about the family's reputation," Mother interrupted me. "Especially now that Linda is about to take on an important position." "Important position?" "Yes. Assistant Pastor Adam has recommended Linda to be the youth department head. I couldn't help but frown at those words. Youth department head. That was a position with significant influence in the church. But why Linda? After Mother left, I resumed my investigation, this time, tracking Linda's behavior records. Her credit card usage history, phone records, social media posts. Everything was recorded as digital footprints. Patterns emerged. Every Wednesday afternoon, Linda would go out citing church meetings. However, no meetings were recorded in the church's official schedule for those times. Then I found decisive evidence. Grayson, a modest business hotel in suburban Minneapolis. Linda's credit card had been making regular payments there for the past 6 months. John, I found something. I quietly picked up the phone and contacted my sister's husband. What do you mean? Every Wednesday, Linda has been going to a specific hotel, and part of the payments are coming from the church's charitable funds. On the other end of the line, John let out a heavy sigh. That's not all, I continued. When Tommy was born, there's a high possibility Linda already knew Adam. What do you mean? At that time, Adam was doing a short internship at this church as a seminary student. It's in the church records. Silence fell. That silence was like the calm before a storm. We might not need to wait for the DNA test results. John didn't answer my words. However, I could hear his heavy breathing over the phone. The evidence gathering continued for another week. Using my expertise as an accountant, I discovered one piece of evidence after another supporting Adam and Linda's relationship. Hotel reservation records, restaurant receipts, and most decisively, records of anonymous transfers between them. The flow of funds disguised as church charitable activities. While it was cleverly concealed, it was obvious to a professional's eye. Adam had been using church funds to maintain his relationship with Linda. However, this investigation had an unexpected side effect. While examining the church's accounting records, I also discovered Mother's misconduct. Martha Anderson had been misappropriating church funds for personal use for years. While the amounts were trivial, the fact was serious. With this, I let out a deep sigh. This evidence would be a powerful weapon to keep Mother in check. But whether to use it or not, my heart wavered. The turning point came in an unexpected form. One afternoon, Linda suddenly visited my house. Amy, you're investigating me, aren't you? My sister's voice mixed anger and fear. What are you talking about? Adam told me. Someone's been examining the church's accounting records. I silently stared at my sister. Linda's eyes wavered with anxiety and panic. Please, keep quiet. Her voice suddenly turned pleading. If this comes to light, Mother will, the church will. Tell me honestly, I said quietly but firmly. Tell me everything. And Linda began to talk. Meeting Adam 5 years ago when he was a seminary student, their secret romance, and Tommy's birth. Does Mother know? Linda covered her face with both hands. Yes. But Mother covered everything up. For the family's reputation. At that moment, my cell phone rang. The screen showed a call from the hospital. Hello? Miss Anderson? Your mother has been rushed to emergency. We suspect a stroke. After hanging up the phone, I turned back to Linda. My sister's face had turned pale. When we arrived at the hospital, Mother had already been taken to intensive care. Waiting there were church officials, and Adam Foster was among them. According to the doctor, Mother had suddenly collapsed at church. The cause was shock from receiving an anonymous letter of accusation at the church. That letter detailed Mother's misappropriation and Adam and Linda's relationship. Who? Linda said in a trembling voice. I silently looked out the window. Under the cloudy sky, snow had begun to fall quietly, as if trying to gently wrap all the events that were about to unfold in a white blanket. In the waiting room of Fairview Southdale Hospital, outside the window, snow continued to fall in the deep darkness. From the intensive care unit, the regular sound of machines occasionally leaked through. Her condition is stable. While receiving the doctor's explanation, I tried to maintain my composure. Mother's stroke was fortunately caught early. However, the possibility of after effects couldn't be ruled out. Let's have a family meeting, Linda said in a trembling voice. In the waiting room were Linda, John, David who had rushed back, and me. Adam had already left, urged by church officials. Before that, John opened his mouth heavily. The DNA test results are in. I held my breath. The color drained from Linda's face. David looked at me, trying to understand the situation. Tommy, John choked on his words. He's not my child. Silence dominated the room. That silence pressed down on our shoulders like heavy lead. Linda. I turned quietly to my sister. Tell us everything. About Mother, about Adam. My sister remained motionless, covering her face with both hands, but eventually she lowered her hands and looked at us with red eyes. 5 years ago, Linda's confession began. When Adam came to the church as a seminary student, her story progressed in fragments, as if unloading a long-carried burden. Meeting Adam when he was a seminary student. secret rendezvous, the panic when pregnancy was discovered, and Mother's decision to rush Linda's marriage to John. Mother knew everything? David couldn't help but interject. Yes. Linda nodded slightly. Mother covered everything up to protect the family's reputation. She even paid Adam hush money. Using church funds? My voice involuntarily turned cold. Linda silently nodded. Her confession perfectly matched my investigation results. Mother's misuse of church funds. Hush money to Adam. Everything was a strategy to protect family reputation. What were you planning? John's voice trembled with anger. How long were you going to continue this lie? Linda stammered. Mother, reputation. Just then, we heard noise from the nurse's station. When we turned around, Mother's bed was being returned to her room. While consciousness had returned, right side paralysis remained. You can visit now, the nurse announced. But please don't excite her. We visited Mother's hospital room one by one. When I entered last, Mother weakly opened her eyes. Amy. Mother's voice had lost its former authority. In my bag. I picked up Mother's handbag. Inside were the church's bankbook and a notebook recording transactions with Adam. Burn everything. I can't, I answered quietly but firmly. Let's put an end to all the secrets. That evening the church's board of elders was urgently convened. Adam Foster's inappropriate relationship and suspicions of church fund misappropriation were officially addressed as agenda items. The results were as expected. Adam was immediately dismissed. Mother's position in the church was effectively stripped. Linda was essentially banished from the church community. The news spread surprisingly fast. Local papers covered this incident extensively as a church scandal. Scandal rocks prestigious church. The truth behind the elder family. Headlines after headlines sliced through our lives. A week later, we had a family discussion about Mother's care. A nursing home would be most appropriate, suggested the medical social worker. Linda strongly objected. You're planning to abandon Mother, even now? Face reality, I answered calmly. Mother needs professional care. And I paused for a moment. This decision is for all of us. Eventually, it was decided that Mother would enter Amy. Mother stopped me on discharge day. Her right side paralysis hadn't fully recovered yet. You might have been right. I couldn't answer those words. I just held her thin hand tightly. But Mother continued, try to understand my feelings about protecting the family's reputation. I do understand, I answered quietly. But reputation built on lies will eventually crumble. Tears glistened in Mother's eyes. Perhaps that was the most honest display of emotion she had ever shown. That night, I had dinner alone with David for the first time in a while. You did well. My husband held my hand. What now? Outside the window, snow continued to fall quietly. The accumulated snow seemed to cover all traces of the past. But surely beneath it, new shoots were beginning to breathe. I'm thinking of looking for a new house, I smiled. Starting our new life somewhere a little away from this town. David nodded silently. His eyes overflowed with understanding and love. Yes, this isn't the end. It's a new beginning. Truth sometimes demands a cruel price. But without paying that price, true happiness cannot be obtained. That's what I believe. A year has passed since then. David and I had settled into a new home in a developing residential area in western Minnesota. 2 hours by car from Eden Prairie. I think it's just the right distance. In the kitchen of our new home, I was preparing to roast a turkey. Outside the window, gentle snow was falling. There wasn't the bitter cold of last year. Need help? David called from behind. His arms gently wrapped around my shoulders. Thanks, but I'm fine. I turned around with a smile. On the table lay papers from the adoption agency. Our preparations for creating a new family were steadily progressing. It feels nostalgic, I said, gazing into the distance. This time last year. Since last Thanksgiving, our lives had changed dramatically. As if a storm had washed everything away. Mother spends her quiet days in a luxury nursing home in suburban Minneapolis. Having lost her former dignity and social influence, she seems to be facing herself for the first time. During my recent visit, Mother spoke to me with an unusually candid expression. Amy, I might have been wrong. The right side paralysis was gradually improving thanks to rehabilitation. However, the wounds in her heart hadn't healed yet. I was so concerned about appearances, I lost sight of what was truly important. Mother's eyes showed a hint of regret I had never seen before. From the nursing home window, you could see the well-maintained garden. The sight of nurses pushing wheelchairs there somehow symbolized Mother's new life. Linda's fall was more dramatic. The divorce was finalized and John gained custody. She can only see Tommy once a month, and even then, under supervision. Her banishment from the church community stripped her of all social foundations. Sis. Last week, Linda suddenly visited our new home. I was speechless at the sight of my emaciated sister. I need to borrow money. Her relationship with Adam had already ended too. After being expelled from the church, he had moved to another state. He wasn't paying any child support. "I'm sorry," I answered quietly but firmly. "I won't clean up your messes anymore." Linda left in tears. Her retreating figure didn't even retain a shadow of my once beautiful sister. Meanwhile, John had begun walking a new path. Having gained custody of Tommy, he was pouring all his energy into his son's education, while accepting the fact that he wasn't Tommy's biological father. His approach to his son as a true father showed deep affection. "Amy, I can't thank you enough," John said when he recently visited with Tommy. "Thank you for revealing the truth. Tommy is still too young to understand the situation, but he's growing up healthy, surrounded by his father's love. Seeing that is a great comfort to me." The church turmoil was gradually moving toward resolution. A new assistant pastor had been appointed, and the misappropriated funds were being returned bit by bit. Combined with Mother's nursing home costs, our finances aren't exactly easy, but that's the result of our choices. "The turkey's starting to smell good." David's voice brought me back to reality. Indeed, a savory aroma was beginning to waft from the oven. "This year's Thanksgiving will be a quiet celebration with just my husband and me. The table is set with a white linen tablecloth and our newly purchased dishes. It's not extravagant, but it's a space that warms the heart." "Hey," David said, gazing at my profile. "Are you happy?" I thought for a moment before slowly nodding. "Yes. We're truly happy now, in the real sense. Happiness built on lies and deception will eventually crumble." That was the lesson Mother learned over a lifetime, and through that pain, we found a new happiness. Outside the window, snow continued to fall quietly. The white crystals gently wrapped the earth, seeming to announce the arrival of a new season. Surely new shoots will sprout come spring. That's how our lives too will move forward, slowly but surely. "Oh, by the way," David said, picking up the adoption papers. "Next Thanksgiving, we might be celebrating as a family of 3. I squeezed my husband's hand. A new form of family. Perhaps that's a genuine bond, unrelated to bloodlines or appearances. Yes, this is the path we've chosen. This is our new form of life, found by choosing truth and discarding deception. In the oven, the turkey was slowly browning to a perfect golden color. Its aroma suggested not bitter memories like last year, but a future full of hope.